Jordan Peterson is a psychology professor who became insanely popular online due to his countercultural views on politics and on gender. He's also someone who's talked a lot about the Bible and Christianity, although he himself is not a Christian. Now, for me personally, I'm not intimately familiar with his work, but the takeaway that I get from hearing him talk about God and Christianity is that although he doesn't think that Christianity is literally true, he still sees it as pragmatically and functionally helpful. For me personally, I kind of started at the opposite end of the spectrum. I ultimately came to believe in Christianity because I believe that it's an objectively true description about reality and the way that things really are. It was only after that, and when I started to read the Bible more and grow in my faith, that's when I started to see all of these functional and practical benefits to believing in Christianity. So I started at one end, and then I ended up somewhere in the middle. And now it seems that the same thing may be true for Jordan Peterson. Take a look at this clip from a recent podcast of his.
So you can think about Christ from a psychological perspective, and my critic, this particular critic that I've been reading, said, well, that doesn't differentiate Christ much from a whole sequence of dying and resurrecting mythological gods. And of course, people have made that claim in comparative religion. Joseph Campbell did that, and Jung to a lesser degree, I would say, but Campbell did that. But the difference, and C.S. Lewis pointed this out as well, the difference between those mythological gods and Christ was that there's a representation of, there's a historical representation of his existence as well. Now you can debate whether or not that's genuine. You can debate about whether or not he actually lived and whether there's credible objective evidence for that, but it doesn't matter in some sense because it does, but there's a sense in which it doesn't matter because there's still a historical story. And so what you have in the figure of Christ is an actual person who actually lived plus a myth. And in some sense, Christ is the union of those two things. The problem is I probably believe that, but I don't know. I'm amazed at my own belief and I don't understand it. Because I've seen sometimes the objective world and the narrative world touch. That's Jungian synchronicity. Yeah. And I've seen that many times in my own life. And so in some sense, I believe it's undeniable. We have a narrative sense of the world. For me, that's been the world of morality. That's the world that tells us how to act. It's real. We treat it like it's real. It's not the objective world. But the narrative and the objective world touch. And the ultimate example of that, in principle, is supposed to be Christ. But I don't know that seems to me oddly plausible.
Yeah.
But I still don't know what to make of it. Partly because it's too terrifying a reality to fully believe. I don't even know what would happen to you if you fully believed it.
If you believed in the story of Christ, or if you believed that history and let's say the narrative meet, let's
both,
say.
I think you, because when you believe that, you buy both those stories. You believe that the narrative and the objective can actually touch.
Now, there's so much here that we can talk about, but some of you might be wondering what exactly is happening in that clip. So let me see if I can help to translate a little bit. It seems to me that Peterson breaks the world down into two different spheres, the objective world and the narrative world. The objective world is where all of the tangible things exist, things that can be observed and detected with the five senses. But the objective world doesn't inherently have any psychological content. It's like looking at a book and only observing the physical aspects of the book. Now, you'll notice that the book is filled with these pages and markings, but the markings don't have any objective meaning. Any meaning that we can attribute to the book is found in the story that the book tells. But the story doesn't have to be true in order for it to be valuable to us. And this is where the narrative world comes in. The narrative world is the place where we tell ourselves stories that give the world interpretation, personal fulfillment, and a sense of meaning and purpose. You can think of this world as containing a bunch of useful fictions that make life valuable and meaningful to us, but it doesn't tell us anything about the way that the world really is in reality, in the objective world. Even though these fictions are pragmatically useful and some are more useful than others, none of them are true in the way that things are true in the objective world. So now, as we just heard him saying, it seems as if he's saying that this pragmatic, useful narrative world and the objective, tangible world don't really connect, although he thought that they can relate in some ways that are meaningful to us, such as when we talk about morality. So given his view, it makes sense why he sees Christ as so significant that it changes everything about the way that he sees reality. As Peterson rightly points out, the story of Christ is not something that you can just tuck away nice and neatly inside of the narrative world. Christianity is not like the other religions that have a prophet saying, "I'm a man come to point you to the narrative world, and this will help you to be better," in some sense. In Christianity, we have God coming from the narrative world and entering into our objective world in order to show us that the narrative world is just as objective and real as the tangible world. So as Peterson rightly pointed out, the existence of Jesus is traceable in history. So you can't just put it in the narrative world as a nice little story that helps people get through tough times in life or something like that. So when Peterson talks about how frightening of a realization this is, it seems to me that the reason why is because his entire paradigm and the way that he's always understood reality would have to shift dramatically. And if this is the case, I think that Peterson can now understand how the early Christians who witnessed the resurrected Christ had to feel. Seeing Christ again resurrected in the flesh completely rearranged the entire framework that the Jews had for understanding a Messiah, understanding scripture, and even how they understood reality. These are the same Jews who had no expectations of a dying and rising Messiah, let alone a resurrection happening in the middle of history. This was absolutely foreign to the Jewish thought. Historically speaking, all of a sudden we see this explosive growth of thousands of devout Jews all of a sudden believing that Jesus was who he said he was, and those same devout Jews started worshiping Jesus as God, and those same cowardly disciples who ran into hiding after Jesus was killed all of a sudden became bold and willing to preach and die for their beliefs. This is why virtually all historians, regardless of their religious views, all agree that the disciples and the early Christians sincerely believed that they saw Jesus being alive again after being crucified. As the non-Christian historian Paula Fredrickson said, "I know in their own terms what they saw was the raised Jesus. That's what they say, and then all the historic evidence we have afterwards attests to their conviction that that's what they saw." I'm not saying that they really did see the raised Jesus. I wasn't there. I don't know what they saw. But I do know that as a historian, they must have seen something. The resurrection of Christ is the ultimate example about how the objective and the narrative world can come together and truth not be compromised. So Peterson rightly recognizes the significance of what it means for the story of Christ to not just be some pragmatic story to help people live better lives or to become more fulfilled or something like that, which it does, but instead it changes everything about the world that we once knew, and it unifies the intangible world with the tangible objective world. So now, with that being said, it seems as if God is working in Peterson's life. So make sure you guys all keep him in prayer and pray for him to come to an objective truth about who God really is and what that means for his life. So those are my thoughts on the situation. Again, I haven't been the biggest follower of Peterson's work and his politics. So if you are, and you think that my analysis is off based on other things that he said or that you read from him elsewhere, then make sure to go ahead and leave those comments down below. And by the way, speaking of politics, it's my view that politics have created a new segregation era today. Go ahead and click on this video to see what I mean. But the next time you forget that Christianity is both subjectively and objectively true, what are you gonna say? What do you mean?